LST at Portland Harbor, rainy afternoon. Wide-angle shot along the side of the LST, showing Madison hoisted up into the LST by way of pulley and tackle and tugged through a davit. The gunwale of the LST is lined with soldiers and sailors, all watching the event with considerable interest and much advice. Watch your head, Commander. Watch his head, you jerk. Did you get flight pay for that, Commander? Is this trip necessary, etc.? The long boat from which he is being hoisted circles and backs alongside. The LST washes in the waves. Madison is pulled to the top of the gunwale and is helped over into the lower deck by infantrymen and sailors. In background, we see the LST as a two-deck vessel with its commander, a Lieutenant J.G., watching from the bridge. It has 4 tanks on it and 2 ducks, or swimming trucks. Also, some 90 men, a 16-man demolition unit, and an infantry platoon, all of whom have been stuck on board this heaving vessel for 2.5 days and are pretty damn seasick. Madison looks pretty green-eyed himself. Portland Harbor aboard the LST afternoon. A wobbly Madison is helped along the lower deck, which is jammed with soldiers and sailors, sprawled, sitting, standing. In the foreground are the old sailor and the young sailor, apparently already derricked aboard and sitting slumped against the gunwale amid a pack of similarly seasick and miserable infantrymen. Madison sinks slowly to the deck, leaning back against somebody's field pack. First infantryman, whose foot he sits on. Watch it, Mac. Group shot with Madison, the old sailor, the young sailor, and several infantrymen. A whip of spray splashes over the gunwale, wetting everyone in the shot, but everybody is too wretched to care. Lieutenant J.G. on bridge shouting, "All right, now hear this, now hear this." The young sailor, "I'm sick, man." Second infantryman, "How many days we been on this bathtub?" Third infantryman, 3 days. Lieutenant J.G., "I'm going to read you a message from your supreme commander." A voice from the lower deck, "We already heard it." Cummings squats down beside Madison. "All right, Charlie, here's your camera." He sticks an IMO camera on Madison's lap. Madison doesn't bother to acknowledge receipt. His head is back against the field pack and his eyes are closed. Lieutenant J.G., reading from a piece of paper. "You are about to embark on a great crusade toward which we have striven these many months." Cummings, "I'll bring your camera batteries in a minute with your battery pack." Lieutenant J.G., reading at the top of his lungs. "The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere go with you." A voice, "Ah, can it?" Lieutenant J.G., shouting to the lower deck, "Lieutenant, can't you keep your men quiet?" An army lieutenant, standing up from the crowded deck. "All right, you men, shut up." A voice, "You already read us about the Great Crusade, Lieutenant." An army lieutenant, "I know. Now he is reading it, so shut up." The young sailor, "I'm sick." An infantryman leans across, offering a helmet to the young soldier. Lieutenant J.G., "The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere go with you." The young sailor is now retching piteously into the infantryman's helmet. Madison, his head now lolling on his chest, is fast asleep. Lieutenant J.G.'s pronouncement continues. Lieutenant J.G.'s voice off-screen. "In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you are bringing about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe." Camera now slowly pulls back and up to reveal the whole endless fleet of vessels, bobbing, pitching, tossing on the choppy waters. Lieutenant J.G.'s voice off-screen. "And security for ourselves in a free world." The old sailor puts his face in front of the misery-ridden Madison. The old sailor. Commander Cummings wants us on the bridge, sir. Madison. Where the hell are we? The old sailor. About 5 miles off the coast of France, sir. You better get up on the bridge, sir. Madison rises wearily with difficulty and follows him along the deck. Mid-channel, cabin on LST. Cummings, in his long john undershirt, has just finished shaving himself. There is a photographer's mate, Enright, standing by the wall of the tiny cabin wearing a field jacket, canvas battery vest, helmet, and with his pockets bulging with film packs. There is a knock on the door. Cummings. Come in. In the mirror we see the door open and Madison and the old sailor enter. Cummings. Close the door, Charlie. Putting his razor away. We got a real break. There's a Navy camera unit assigned to this ship. This is photographer's mate Enright, who's going to show us how these cameras work. Madison. Swell. Cummings. Putting the razor case in his toilet kit. Go ahead, sailor. Photographer's mate Enright looks serious. Madison sits bleakly on the bunk. Enright. Well, I don't quite understand your assignment, sir. Let me see if I can get this straight. You and your men are going to get into the water with the engineers. As I understand it, sir, that's about 4 feet of water. It's pretty rough seas, and you'll be lucky to keep your feet. He takes Madison's camera. They're pretty heavy. He now hoists the 10-pound battery from the floor and sticks it into the canvas jacket on Madison's back. Madison almost sags to the floor. Enright to Cummings, now tying his tie before the mirror. I've got a suggestion, sir, that you and your men should stay in the LCVP with my crew. It's fancy, but at least you'll be able to hold your cameras reasonably steady. Cummings, fixing his tie. We want to be on that beach with the very first men, sailor. Enright. Well, my helmet goes off to you, gentlemen. I'll go down and get some gelatin, waterproof your cameras. Cummings, slipping into his windbreaker. We'll be down in the wardroom getting a bite to eat, Enright. Enright, at the cabin door. Yes, sir. He exits. Cummings leans across Madison to fetch a revolver belt and holster from the bunk. He takes out the .45, checks its movement, puts it back in the holster, and buckles the belt around his waist. Cummings. Men, before we go down to eat, I want to read you a message from our Supreme Commander. He takes a piece of paper out of his pocket. Madison stretches out on the bunk with an anguished sigh. The old sailor stands, staring bleakly down at his feet. Cummings, reading. Soldiers, sailors, armies of the Allied expeditionary forces. You are about to embark on a great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere go with you. Mid-channel LST, rain, dawn. High wide-angle shot looking down on the deck of the LST, now the scene of considerable excitement and activity. The men are all on their feet, checking their equipment. Officers and non-coms move around the deck, shouting, Sergeant, line those men up. All right, get in those trucks. Navy engineers to the bow. Get over there. A high Tennessee twang rises above the other voice. Now I want all you men to check your goddamn equipment one more time. The very first gray streaks of dawn lighten the sky, and the rain pours down in sheets of heavy drizzle. Chief Petty Officer. Lower that boat, damn it. Angle shot looking up from the water to the LST as an LCVP is being lowered over the side. Another LCVP is already in the water alongside bucking and tossing. All around, other LCVPs are being lowered and men are climbing down the nets on the other LSTs. The air is filled with shouts and curses. It is still quite dark out and the scene is grotesque. A scream rips out of the night and then a shout. He fell! He fell! A patrol boat streaks through the melange of assault boats. A loud hailer suddenly bursts out in the night air. Keep in line, keep in line. On the lower deck of the LST, Cummings, Madison, and the old sailor are surrounded by demolition engineers. Cummings is checking everyone's equipment. Cummings to Madison. All you have to do is pull this trigger and that starts the camera. Madison. Too miserable to do anything but complain. Miserable rain. In the background, infantrymen are loading into the ducts. A public address system suddenly blares out. PA system. Now hear this. Okay, 1st Division. Get in there and give him hell. Cummings looking widely about. Where's the kid? The old sailor. He's too sick, sir. Lieutenant J.G. of Demolition Unit calling to his men. All right, men. 1st demolition team over the side and into the boats. Cummings to Madison. All right, Charlie, this is it. 2 LCVPs swash and pitch alongside, smashing up against the side of the LST. The climbing nets and ladders are filled with demolition engineers, the bottom men trying to time their jump into the LCVP with the rise of the boat on the waves. Madison clambers over the rail. Suddenly, a scream, almost in his ear. He turns, terrified. An LCVP has suddenly washed high up against the LST and has crashed against the descending engineers. Shouts, "Move! Keep moving, you stupid nut!" etc. Shooting up from the LCVP, pitching wildly alongside, is Madison clutching his camera, jumps. Tight shot looking down on Madison lying on the deck of the LCVP, eyes closed and clutching his camera. A wave splashes over the boat, drenching him. Over all this, we hear the constant booming of the naval artillery. 7,000 feet from the beaches. Dawn. Long wide-angle shot shooting out from the beaches to the channel. The sky is still dark gray, but dawn is breaking slowly. We can see more clearly now the vast conglomeration of LCVPs and other beaching craft chugging slowly in towards us from across the choppy sea. Behind them, the hulking LSTs and other transports, the huge rhino barges. Patrol boats scoot between the mess of slowly oncoming craft. Loud hailers bleat out, "Keep in line, keep 'em moving," etc. For behind it all, we can see the flashes of the big naval guns as they continue their relentless barrage. 5,000 feet out, around the Dawn. Photographer's mate Enright stands in the bow of the LCVP, his camera braced on his shoulder, shooting back to the stern of the boat, his carrier behind him. Dawn is breaking more quickly. Enright is standing, braced against the pitch and toss of the boat, his camera pressed against his face. His carrier, Cummings, and the ensign are also in the bow. In the foreground are Madison, the old sailor, and 6 demolition engineers, seated wet and shivering. Madison is absolutely numb with cold and wet and just plain terror. Cummings and the ensign stare straight ahead to the beaches. The rain drizzles down and nothing but white mist fills the gray skyline. The LCVP rises and shoots forward on a sudden swell of water. Cummings, shouting. About how far out are we? Ensign, shouting back. Maybe 6,000 feet. We should see the low water mark at any time. Cummings, shouting to Madison. We're about 6,000 feet out, Charlie. A boatswain's mate of the engineers stands midship. Boatswain's mate yelling to the engineers. All right, let's get up front. Ensign shouting. There's the low water barrier. Now, in the gray-white mist, washed by waves of dark water, there can just be seen, some 500 feet ahead, thick ends of iron and steel rails poking out over the sea line. Ensign shouts, "Stand by to lower the ramp." Engineers crowd into the frame to look over the bow. First engineer. How are we going to get at the damn things? Second engineer. We're going to have to shinny up. Suddenly, a burst of mortar and 88s firing from ahead. Ensign. They're shooting at us. A German flare explodes high over them and bleaches the last remnants of night. Cummings cups his mouth and shouts something. The old sailor lurching up to the bow. I can't hear you. Ensign. Let down the ramp. The engineers splash out into the water which comes up to their necks. Splashing, struggling, they edge forward toward the low water barricade which now looms up in front of the LCVP. It consists of a 6-foot barricade of jagged iron and steel rails wired and mined. The engineers shout instructions at each other. Get on my back. Frank, shinny up. That damn pole, etc. In the LCVP, Cummings is pushing a numb, half-frozen Madison to the bow ramp. Madison, I'm freezing. Cummings, let's go. Ensign, shouting at the engineers, blow something up. They're zeroed in on us here. Nothing more can be heard, although everyone is shouting. The air is one continued thrum of exploding shells and naval artillery. The sky flares with red-yellow incandescent bursts. Engineers splash through the water. A barricade is blown up. Rifle and machine gun fire adds to the ineffable din. Suddenly, the LCVP is nearly struck by an 88 shell, and the whole boat, with its ramp open, is swept right into the air and through the newly breached barricade towards the beach. Madison, Cummings, and the old sailor are pitched into the air and come swirling down, gasping for breath, thrashing about on the beach side of the barricade. Tight shot of Madison thrashing about in the water, gasping for air, still clutching his camera. He looks desperate. Madison's POV. Not more than 1,000 feet directly ahead of him stretches the naked, white, unoccupied stretch of sand called Omaha Beach. Its clean white expanse is covered with steel jackstraws, wooden stakes, and long fences of tubed steel, all wired, all mined, and all obviously sinister. Madison stands knee-deep in water, staring at the beach, clutching his camera. He promptly wheels about face and begins splashing away from the beach and back to the LCVP, about 500 feet to his seaward side. 2,000 feet out, aboard the LCVP Dawn. Wide-angle shot looking seaward through the open ramp of the LCVP, singles out Enright braced against the jamb of the ramp, filming furiously. Enright's POV. We see what he is filming. Madison is splashing his way seaward to the LCVP, and Cummings is splashing his way beachward to Madison. Cummings. You're going the wrong way. The beach is that way. Madison splashes toward us, shouting. Madison. I know where the beach is. They're shooting at us. What's the matter with you? Cummings and Madison splash toward each other in belt-high water. Disaster, death, and the havoc of war in the background. Cummings yanks his revolver from its holster. Cummings, shouting, You yellow rat! Head into that beach. Madison, what's the matter with you? They are barely 10 yards apart. Cummings points the revolver at Madison. Cummings, screaming, Take pictures! Take pictures! Madison screaming, What? Cummings fires. The shot hits Madison in the thigh, spins him partly around, and almost knocks him into the water. Madison flails about in hip-deep water, staring aghast at Cummings. Then, in total terror, he wheels and starts splashing to the beach as fast as he can. Enright is taking movies of Cummings splashing after Madison, who is now splashing headlong into the shallows of Omaha Beach. Dead bodies float in the water, pitched about by the surge and swell. The air is deafened by bombs, mines, mortars, artillery, machine guns. Reverse long shot from the beach seaward. Madison comes dashing up on the beach, the first man on the long, white, empty expanse of sand by some 20 yards. He is bug-eyed with terror. The camera pans him across the 400 feet of beach as he dashes heedlessly past the steel jackstraws and wooden stakes on the beach, ripping his trousers on the barbed wire, stumbling against the steel obstacles. He vaults the 4-foot wall about 300 feet up the beach like Jesse Owens, flinging his camera into the air as he does so, and sprints the last 100 feet to the steep escarpment at the end of the beach, clutching his right thigh. Just as he reaches the base of the escarpment, he apparently trips the detonator of a landmine, for there is an explosion just behind him and he is thrown, arms outflung, onto the sand. Long wide-angle panorama shot showing Madison's body sprawled on the beach. For the length of this shot, Madison's body is the only body on the long white stretch of Omaha Beach. Close shot of Enright hiding behind a log pile obstacle loading his camera. He snaps his camera shut, dashes farther up the beach toward the escarpment. Behind him, the beach is beginning to fill with the black forms of soldiers, tanks, trucks. The overwhelming thunder of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire continues. A mine explodes in the foreground. Enright dashes up to where Cummings is standing beside Madison, staring down at his best friend's body, numb with shock. Enright. Well, he's the first dead man on Omaha Beach, if that means anything, Commander. Cummings stares at Enright and then bursts into tears. Cummings, sobbing. Now that's funny. That's funny. Oh my God, that's funny. A mine explodes about 20 feet away, showering the screen with sand. Enright and Cummings dash off the escarpment. We hear the whine of ricocheting bullets as a medic, identified by his Red Cross armband, crawls across the frame to Madison's body. Fade out. Fade in. Emily's home, her bedroom. A camera study in grief. Emily sits woodenly in the chair by her window, unaware of the sun streaming in through the white curtains, bleaching her face. She seems unaware of anything, really. She is in her bedclothes and a wrapper, her face sallow, her lips pale, almost imperceptible, her eyes swollen and dry, long past tears. She sits numbly, her external self as dead as Charlie, content apparently with the interior world she can create for herself out of fragments of memory, and supported by the rigid premise that Madison is not dead. There is a gentle knock on the door which she doesn't seem to hear. Then the door opens to admit her mother, Mrs. Barham. Emily, Commander Cummings is here to condole again. Emily is annoyed by the interruption of exterior life. Emily, I can't very well be condoled with since I'm still pretending Charlie's alive. Mrs. Barham, well, as long as you still know it's pretending. I do think, Emily, we've had enough of this sinister withdrawal of yours. It's 8 days since you went off into this medieval retreat. You know, you're doing just what I did, and you'll end up just as Dottie. There's very little satisfaction in it. Emily says nothing, already oblivious of her mother. Mrs. Barham exhibits polite disapproval, backs out of the room, and closes the door softly. Landing outside her bedroom, Mrs. Barham comes out, closing the door. For a moment in the half-darkness of the upstairs landing, she allows her face to reveal her own grief and genuine concern for her daughter. but she quickly reassumes her old potty self and goes sailing down the stairs to the living room. Emily's home living room. Bus Cummings rises from an overstuffed chair at her entrance. He is holding a folded newspaper. Mrs. Barham cheerfully. Absolutely wooden with grief. Sends her best, but asks to be excused. Cummings. Oh, yes. Of course, I understand. I just stopped by to show her this. Extending the newspaper. Thought it might make her feel a little better. Insert close-up of the newspaper opened for our inspection. It is a copy of the New York Globe, June 14th, 1944. The headline being whatever it was for that date and presumably dealing with the advances made by the Allied armies. However, what is most eye-catching is a 4-column photograph of Madison as he leaped over the seawall on Omaha Beach, his head thrown back, his arms outflung. All in all, a photographic masterpiece in the study of gallantry. Cummings, off-screen. That's yesterday's New York Globe. Mrs. Barham, off-screen. Yes, I'm on to that. What is it you want me to see? Cummings, off-screen. The photograph. Charlie Madison, the first American on Omaha Beach. It's on the front page of the New York Globe. Mrs. Barham looks at the newspaper, politely interested. Mrs. Barham. Well, it can't be said to be a very good likeness. It's mostly his back, isn't it? Cummings. Ma'am, this photograph is on the front page of almost 200 newspapers in the United States alone. We honestly didn't think it would catch on that big. Our press office people just sent it out as a standard release, and first thing we knew, well, Mrs. Barham, this picture was in practically every London newspaper yesterday. I was sure you'd seen it. Charlie's a hero, ma'am. Our public relations office is talking now of holding some sort of ceremony over his grave, building some sort of monument. Mrs. Barham, appalled. A monument? Cummings. Probably nothing more than a simple bronze plaque, but the Free French have indicated they'd be willing to declare Charlie's grave a French national shrine. Mrs. Barham. That's depraved. Cummings. We think the President of the United States will make a statement about Charlie. I didn't want to tell you about these things yet because we haven't got firm commitments, but Admiral Jessup is very close to the President. I don't know if we can get Charlie the Congressional Medal of Honor, but he's a cinch for the Navy Cross. As soon as I get an extra copy of Life magazine, I'll bring it to you. Mrs. Barham. What on earth for? Cummings, beaming. This picture of Charlie's on the cover of Life magazine. Mrs. Barham. Oh, this is shoddy. A French national shrine indeed. One must expect, I suppose, this sort of scandal-mongering from the French. But you're supposed to be his friend. Couldn't you have done something more to keep this whole sordid business out of the press? Cummings. Ma'am? Mrs. Barham. Of course, we're very disappointed in Charlie, but he has paid his price and there's no need to rake it up. Cummings. I'm not sure you have this exactly right, Mrs. Barham. Charlie is a hero. Emily, off-screen. Mother? Mrs. Barham. Oh dear, there she is. Now, don't say a word to her about any of this. I'll tell her when I think she's well enough. She moves out to the foot of the stairs in the foyer, leaving behind Cummings, who is beginning to feel like a hero in Kafka. Emily's home foyer. Mrs. Barham is at the foot of the stairs. Emily walks down, hair tidied, dressed in her uniform now and buttoning her jacket. Mrs. Barham. Going into work. That's very sensible of you. Emily. I don't know how you put up with me this long, Mother. At the foot of the stairs, Mrs. Barham takes her daughter's arm and whispers quickly. Mrs. Barham. Don't forget that man is still here. Come to commiserate. This is his third visit, and he's going to say a lot of comforting things. So you will be polite, won't you? Emily. Oh, he's just a bit sincere. Mrs. Barham. I must say I find him grotesque. She adjusts a smile onto her face, and the pair move into the living room. Emily's home living room. Across Emily and her mother to Cummings, standing with head bowed, hat in hand. He slowly looks up to reveal an extravagantly grave face. He comes forward to Emily and merely takes her hand and looks mutely into her face. Cummings. Yes. Emily, you're doing the right thing. Bury yourself in work. We've all got to keep going. Emily's eye is caught by the New York Globe lying on the sofa, and she crosses over to it. Mrs. Barham. Emily? Well, I must warn you, Charlie's picture is in all the papers, and they're going to build a monument on his grave. Emily, studying the Globe. What on earth for? All he did was die. Dear me, we shall be celebrating cancer and automobile smash-ups next. Cummings, erupting. He didn't just die, Emily. He sacrificed his life. Mrs. Barham. Well, that was very pagan of him. Cummings. He was the first American to die on Omaha Beach. Emily. Was there a contest? Cummings. Emily, I don't understand you. I thought you'd be proud. Emily, handing the paper to her mother. You might as well burn this, Mother, along with yesterday's Daily Mail, which I fished out of the garden fire. To Cummings. We no longer take pride in death in this house, Bus. What was admirable about Charlie was his sensation of life. His cowardly, selfish, greedy appreciation of life, unadorned and uncertain as it is. I loved him very much. I don't think I shall ever love anyone as much again. But I shall try. She starts out to the foyer. Are you going back to the Navy building, Bus? Cummings turns to Mrs. Barham, hoping for sanity from that quarter. Cummings. No, I have to stop by the hospital to pick the Admiral up. Emily, disappearing into the foyer. At Edgware Road. I'll take the bus there. Mrs. Barham, nudging an unhappy Cummings. You know, I thought I saw her peering at me through the window when I was burning those newspapers. London suburb, Navy Hospital private room. Admiral Jessup, dressed in his shirt and pants, puffs a cigar, his old, brisk, groomed self again. He is putting toilet articles into a small valise on the bed, which is otherwise already packed. Cummings is standing on the other side of the bed, holding the Admiral's jacket on its hanger, even more unhappy than he was in the last scene. Admiral Jessup. I was damned fond of Charlie. He was one of the few really decent human beings I've ever known, aside from being the best dog robber in the world. What the hell was Charlie ever doing on Omaha Beach in the first place? Cummings. What, sir? Admiral Jessup. Exactly what was this movie Charlie was making on Omaha Beach? What was Charlie doing making a movie in the first place? Cummings. He was making your movie, sir. Admiral Jessup. Yes, you keep saying my movie. What do you mean, my movie? Cummings. The movie you wanted made about the demolition engineers, sir. Admiral Jessup. I don't remember any. He turns puzzled back to knotting his tie before the mirror. Suddenly, he understands and he turns back in utter horror to Cummings. Oh my God, Bus. Was this some idea I conceived when I was cracking up? I don't remember any movie. And you went ahead and did it? But I was unbalanced at the time, Bus. I wasn't responsible. You mean Charlie Madison? Oh my God. He sinks aghast onto the bed. Cummings. Well, sir, we wanted a hero. Now we've got one. Admiral Jessup. You don't send a man to his death because you want a hero? Cummings. Well, sir, the whole purpose of our coming over here was to find something to catch the eye of the Committee on Military Affairs. To remind them that the Navy is still an essential service. We're trying to keep from being scrapped, sir. The Admiral stands, still shaken. Admiral Jessup. May God forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. He turns back to the mirror and his tie still pained, but he has his work to do. If you want to catch the eye of the Joint Committee on Military Affairs, Bus, you'll have to bury Charlie in Washington, not on Omaha Beach. Preferably right in the middle of the Senate committee room and certainly no further away from Pennsylvania Avenue. I will not authorize funds for any monument on Omaha Beach. We need something more immediate than that. Give me my jacket. Slips into his jacket. Have you got my flight orders? Cummings. Yes, sir. You leave for Washington tonight with Marv Ellender on the 2200 flight. Admiral Jessup, buttoning his jacket. The only solace any of us has is that if Charlie were here, he'd be laughing himself silly. Port of Southampton Day. Lieutenant Commander Charles E. Madison slowly descends the ramp of a hospital ship. We know it's a hospital ship because we can see the huge red cross painted on the hull of the ship behind him. Out of the hold, an endless file of wounded men are being carried on stretchers down to the docks. Madison is one of the ambulatory cases. He wears a red regulation hospital robe and blue hospital pajamas. An oak tag label dangles from his lapel. He requires a cane. His face is set in a rigid mask of bitterness. The other ambulatory patients, hobbling and lurching along down the ramp with him on crutches or with bandaged arms and heads, are all in the best of spirits. Voices and shouts. Oh man, I thought I'd never see this side of the channel again. Hey nurse. Hey lieutenant. Where are we supposed to go? Hey, they're serving food. Oh man, look at that nurse. How'd you like to have her stick a thermometer in your mouth? Luis, if we get separated, remember, I'm in the 8th Infantry 112th Regiment. 1st Company. The good spirits of all the others contrast with the somber, coldly belligerent set of Madison's face. Another angle as Madison and the other ambulatory patients reach the docks at the bottom of the ramp. A medic gently herds them to the dock railing. Medic. Ambulatory patients over here. You're now at the 6th Medical Relocation Center in Southampton. You'll all be properly taken care of in just a few minutes. Is there anyone who needs immediate attention? We're here to help you. Madison and the other ambulatories hobble along to join other ambulatory patients in their tagged robes. We see now the docks are filled with rows of stretchers and bandaged men. Uniformed nurses and medics move up and down between the stretchers, checking the identification labels, marking their clipboards, and ministering to the wounded. Volunteer English Red Cross ladies add to the crush by wheeling tea carts of coffee and magazines. Indeed, one Red Cross lady suddenly wheels her cart into the foreground, piled high with newspapers and Life magazines. We see Madison's pictures on the cover. Red Cross lady to Madison's group. Newspapers? Magazines? Any of you chaps want a copy of Newsweek? Life magazine? To Madison in particular. Want a copy of Life? Tight shot across the Red Cross lady to Madison, staring somberly out over the harbor. He turns, showing us again the quiet anger on his face. Madison, coldly. No, thank you. I've seen it already. He turns back to staring fixedly out over the harbor while voices fly around him. Voices. All I want is 3 days in London. I hear you have to beat them off with clubs. You know what's a great town for broads? Liverpool. You have to beat them off with clubs. Hendon Airport, night. Long establishing shot, almost duplicating the shot that began the film. A DC-4 looming vaguely on the black landing strip. 3 official cars lined up some yards away. A clump of uniformed people by the cars. Some loading activity at the plane. In short, a high-level military mission is about to depart. Across Emily at the door of the car to the Admiral and Cummings, with Ellender and Captain Spaulding supervising the transfer of the luggage to the plane. Ellender, to one of the plane's crew. Leave the attaché case and the little bag. The rest can go. We get the feeling a car is approaching us in the dark night, its headlights dimmed for blackout purposes. Admiral Jessup to Cummings. You and Adams lock up the shop. I want you both in Washington by Wednesday night. And forget about that tomb. Cummings. Yes, sir. Cummings's attention, however, is to the car, which screeches to a halt 15 yards away. The Admiral gives it a brief glance and turns to Ellender. Admiral Jessup. Admirals Koenig and Ridgway are supposed to testify on Thursday. I don't think they'll get to us before Monday. Ellender. More likely Tuesday, the way that congressional hearings usually run. Chief Petty Officer Adams, who is driving the newly arrived car, opens the door and gets out. He is obviously in distress. Adams. Hey, Bus, can I see you a minute? Cummings. Something the matter? Adams. As Cummings moves to him. Yeah, I'll say something's the matter. Two-shot of Adams and Cummings. In the background, the Admiral and Ellender are fishing their attaché cases out of the first of the cars. Captain Spaulding waits in attendance on them. Adams lowers his voice to a conspiratorial mutter. I just got a call from the 6th Relocation Center in Southampton. That's where they bring the casualties from France. They've got a Lieutenant Commander Charles E. Madison there ready to be released. Would we arrange transportation for him and bring him a uniform? I don't know whether to laugh or to cry. During this speech, Cummings nods, purses his lips, and cleans his glasses, as if he were listening to the most perfunctory of problems. Adams. I don't know if you heard me, Bus. I said. Cummings. Yes, I heard you, Paul. What's the gag? In the background, the Admiral, Ellender, and Spaulding, carrying their attaché cases and hand luggage, are crossing the landing strip to the plane. Adams. I spoke to him, Bus. He's alive. Cummings. What do you mean he's alive? He was practically a French national shrine. How the hell can he be alive? As Adams and Cummings speak, Emily stands in the background by her car. Adams. He got on the phone. He said, Hi, Paul. I said, Hi, Charlie. He said, Do me a favor, Paul. Call Miss Barham in the motor pool and tell her I'm all right. Cummings. I saw him with my own eyes, Paul. Adams. He also said, Tell Bus, if I ever lay my hands on him again, I'm going to belt him right in his big, fat stern sheets. Close-up of Cummings. He's convinced, but miserable about it. Cummings. He's alive. The first dead man on Omaha Beach is alive. Oh boy, that's great. 200 newspapers in the United States alone, the front cover of Life magazine, every newsreel in the world, and he's alive. Adams. What's he mad at you for, Bus? The expression of chagrin on Cummings' face changes to one of horror. Cummings. Not only is he alive, he's a coward. We had a nice dead hero, now we have a lousy live coward. Adams. What's the matter with you, Bus? Cummings suddenly seizes the startled Adams by his jacket collar, almost throttling the poor fellow. Cummings, screaming. Is this a gag, Paul? Adams, screaming. It's no gag. Cummings thrusts his chief petty officer from him, breaks for the DC-4, shouting to Admiral Jessup, who is about to be helped into the plane. Cummings, shouting. Admiral, sir. He's alive, damn it. The Admiral, Ellender, and Spaulding turn to see what all the agitation is about. In the background, Emily takes a few steps forward, not quite sure what was shouted. The Admiral stares at Cummings, who now comes to a halt in front of him. Admiral Jessup. Alive? Madison? Cummings. Yes, sir. The relocation center in Southampton waiting to be released right now, sir. Admiral Jessup. Thank God. Ellender. Oh, that's wonderful, Bus. Wonderful. Now Emily emerges more clearly out of the darkish background, approaching the group on the plane, utterly unconscious of what she's doing, too terrified to believe what she suspects she has heard. Admiral Jessup, beaming at Cummings. Now, Bus. Now we can bring your first man on Omaha Beach right into room 610 of the Senate office building. Cummings. Sir? Admiral Jessup. I want Madison flown to Washington on the first plane out of Southampton. We're going to give Charlie a parade right down Pennsylvania Avenue and right up to the front lawn of the White House, where the president himself will decorate Charlie with the Navy Cross. Cummings, unhappily. I'm not so sure if we should involve the president in this, sir. Admiral Jessup, the president's an old Navy man. He's sympathetic to our position throughout. Cummings. Yes, sir, but I just don't think we should go that big. Admiral Jessup, positively elated. We're going to make a big brass band hero out of Charlie using every coarse theatricality the public relations office is overpaid to think up. And when I walk into that hearing on Monday or Tuesday, I'll smile my crisp military smile at all those senators. And then, in a perfunctory way, I'll introduce my two aides. Captain Ellender here, my technical advisor, and Lieutenant Commander Charles E. Madison, gentlemen. The first American on Omaha Beach. A sailor. Bus, that's what's known as letting them have it in spades. Doubled, redoubled, and vulnerable. He positively guffaws. Charlie will then modestly answer a few of the senators' questions. Cummings, beginning to feel genuinely ill. Oh, he'll be modest, all right. Sir, I better tell you what really happened on D-Day, sir. The Admiral, however, has turned his attention to Emily, who has been advancing on the group one dazed step after another. Emily, almost too terrified to ask. Is he alive? Is he alive? Is that what you're saying, that he's alive? Admiral Jessup. Yes, Miss Barham, we think he is. Emily. Oh dear. Oh dear. It's all she can get out. She stares helplessly at all of them, her eyes blinking, and then raises her face, tears slipping in individual beads out from beneath her lashes, nevertheless exhilarated by a faint, mute smile of ineffable joy. Admiral Jessup. Miss Barham, we're almost as happy about this as you are. Emily. Thank you, sir. Admiral Jessup. Hey, Bus, I want you to drive this young lady down to Southampton just as fast as you can make it. Get going. Shakes Spaulding's hand. Goodbye, Harry. Spaulding. Good trip, sir. He turns, seizes the hands being offered to him from the open doorway of the DC-4, and clambers up into the plane. The Admiral suddenly reappears in the doorway of the plane and calls to Cummings. Admiral Jessup. Oh, bus. Cummings. Yes, sir? Admiral Jessup. You were going to tell me something before about Charlie on D-Day. Cummings hesitates briefly, then calls back to the Admiral. Cummings. Oh, nothing, sir. Have a good flight. Admiral Jessup to Cummings. Well, don't forget, I want him in Washington tomorrow. I don't care what brass you have to throw off the plane. Cummings. Yes, don't worry, sir. I'll have him on the first flight out of Southampton. A ground crewman, moving into the background. You better move back there, sir. Cummings nods brusquely, turns on his heel, and strides off in the direction of Chief Petty Officer Adams, waiting apprehensively by his car. Emily, still enchanted, trots along behind him. Spaulding swerves off to where the official cars and the other drivers are waiting. In the background, propellers of the DC-4 suddenly whir into activity. About halfway to Adams, Cummings whirls on Emily and shouts something at her. The DC-4 slowly taxis off in the background. Cummings, shouting to be heard over the motors. What I didn't tell the Admiral back there was that Charlie Madison became the first man on Omaha Beach because I chased him up there with a Colt 45. He was, in fact, running the other way, bolting under fire, an errant act of cowardice in the face of the enemy. Our big brass band hero is a big brass band coward. But I didn't tell the Admiral that because the Navy needs a hero. Even a miserable, lousy, yellow, cowardly hero like Charlie Madison. It's a hoax, Emily. A hoax. The whole thing's a hoax. Emily couldn't be prouder. Ah, that's my Charlie. Craven to the end. Behind them, the DC-4 suddenly fills the night with a roar of its motors. Cummings strides off again to Adams at the car. Emily happily behind him. Cummings shouts to Spaulding, Harry, clear me a space for Madison on the next flight out of Southampton. I'll call you from the hospital there. Hospital Administration Office. A typical improvised military office in another smaller Quonset hut. One enters from the street through a plain wooden door. A second one in the opposite wall leads outside to the interior area of the hospital. This door bears a placard. No admittance except authorized personnel. A nurse captain sits behind the principal desk. Several army clerks sit behind other desks, rattling away on their typewriters or filing in the many cabinets. Cummings is standing by the desk on the phone as we cut in. Cummings, on phone. Harry, I'm in the administrative office right now. Chief Petty Officer Adams is studying the bulletin board, which has a splendid large poster on it advising GIs to watch out for VD. Emily is pacing restlessly around the crowded, clattery room. Cummings, on phone. I can have Madison at the airport by 1 o'clock. Now don't worry about it. You just clear a place on the plane for him, that's all. Emily, in a feverish state of impatience, goes to the door marked No Admittance, opens it halfway and looks out. The nurse captain notes this sympathetically. Cummings, on phone. You told Grissom? When? You told the Public Relations Office? Harry, what the hell's the matter with you? We'll have every correspondent in London down here. The nurse solicitously to Emily at the door. Honey, why don't you go on through and wait for him outside? Emily. Thank you. She steps out of the office. Hospital outside office night. A very long paved footpath and arcaded passageway are lit just enough for camera purposes. The rest of the hospital sleeps silently in the dark night. Emily smokes anxiously. Now, a nurse trundles a small medical cart across the roofed passageway at the extreme background of the frame, and Emily whirls to it. Disappointed, she turns full face to the camera and lights another cigarette. How silent it all is now. Suddenly she senses Madison through the small of her back, and she slowly turns so that we see across her down the long length of dimly lit footpath. There, at the far end, turning in from the roofed passageway, is Charlie. He is dressed, walking with a noticeable limp, using a cane. She starts involuntarily a few paces up the path, then stops. Madison, who had been wrapped in his brown study, looks up, stops. Madison's POV, looking down the footpath to Emily, half shadowed but lit enough to see she is smiling. Behind her, the administration office hut, blackout shades drawn with cracks of light here and there. Emily, you're limping, Commander. The old wound acting up? Madison limps a few slow steps down toward her. He stops, regards her warily. Emily now ambles slowly up the path to him. Emily. Where have you been? We expected you back a week ago yesterday. Madison. I'm sorry. I had to go to France for a few days. It's out of season this time of year. Emily. No one worth knowing was there, I'm sure. Madison. Very rough element going to France these days. The two of them regard each other on the footpath. Then suddenly she whirls over the few yards separating them and into his arms. They embrace. Emily. Oh, Charlie. Charlie. Madison. Hey, careful of my leg. Emily. Oh, shut up. Let me hold you. Hospital administration office. The office is jammed with newspaper men, perhaps 20 of them, both uniformed and civilian with and without cameras. Cummings, Adams, and a clerk are trying to get them back outside. Cummings, shouting, All right. I haven't seen him myself yet. A camera flash explodes almost in his face. Nurse captain, shouting, You'll have to wait outside. I'm terribly sorry. You'll have to wait outside. Shouts and voices from the reporters. When was he brought here? Is he seriously wounded? Is he coming out? What's going on? What's this about de Gaulle? Cummings to Adams. I better get him. Cummings crosses quickly to the door marked No Admittance, reaches for the knob. Madison and Emily are still embracing as Cummings comes out. He quickly shuts the door and hurries up the path to the lovers. Full shot of Madison and Emily in embrace. Madison looks up over her shoulder and Emily turns her head to see what the flare of noise was. Cummings. Hey, Charlie. Madison. Don't you come within cane's distance of me, you fink. You tried to kill me. Madison releases himself from Emily's arms. Cummings. Oh, go on, Charlie. Don't make such a big dramatic deal of this. Right now I've got a plane waiting to take you back to Washington. Now we have to be at the airport in half an hour and there are about 20 reporters in that office and more piling in by the minute. We have 5 minutes for pictures and a few questions, so let me brief you quickly on what you're to say. Madison. I'm going to say the truth, Buzz. Cummings. I don't know how much of my little hoax you know, Charlie. Madison. Enough. Cummings. Well, your last words as you led the charge up the beach were, Okay, men, let's show them whose beach this is. Madison. Not quite the epic stature of, We've just begun to fight, Bus. Cummings. Yeah, well, you know. Madison. I'm going to tell him the truth, Buzz. I'm going to tell anyone who wants to know the plain, unattractive, and not very epic truth. Cummings. Charlie, we don't have much time. Madison. I'm going to tell him that a deranged admiral had a demented idea for a lunatic movie whose only purpose was to juice up the Navy's bid for military appropriations. That my gallant wounds were inflicted on me by my brother officer, the Fink. Cummings, beginning to suspect Madison is serious. Charlie, you've got a legitimate beef against me, okay? Madison. And that my last inspirational words as I led the charge away from the beach were, "Let's get the hell out of here." Cummings and Emily looked quizzically at Madison. I've had a bad week, Bus. I've been in battle, and I've seen the howl and heard the horror of it again. I will not contribute to your wretched little hoax. I will not help you preserve the wonder of war. I want people to know I was a coward. I want people to know the whole shabby story about my heroism. Emily doesn't quite trust her ears. Cummings. Charlie, I don't understand you. Do you know what'll happen if... Madison. Oh, I know what'll happen. I'll embarrass my country, dishonor my service, disgrace my admiral, humiliate my family, and probably get myself thrown in the brig for a couple of years. Emily. Then why do it? Madison. Because it's the right thing to do. Close-up of Emily, stunned, open-mouthed with disbelief. Emily. I can't believe it. Is this the Charlie Madison who once said, "God save us all from people who do the right thing. It's the rest of us who always get our backs broken"? Are you seriously going to destroy everything that means anything to you, Charlie, in a futile gesture of virtue? And you're going to put yourself in jail, are you? Madison. I don't care what happens to me. Emily. How bloody brave of you. But you do care what happens to me. At least you said you did. What am I supposed to do while you sit about in your prison cell for 5 or 6 years, admiring the glisten of your own martyrdom? Madison. Emily, I want the world to know what a fraud war is. Emily. But war isn't a fraud, Charlie. It's very real. At least, that's what you've always tried to tell me, isn't it? That we shall never get rid of war by pretending it's unreal? It's the virtue of war that's the fraud, not war itself. It's the valor and the self-sacrifice and the goodness of war that needs the exposing. Here you are, being brave, self-sacrificing, and positively clanking with moral fervor, perpetuating the very things you detest, merely to do the right thing. Honestly, your conversion to morality is actually funny, Charlie. All this while I've been terrified of becoming Americanized. And you silly ass, have turned into a bloody sentimental Englishman. Madison. Emily, there's a matter of principle involved here. Emily. A matter of what? Oh, Charlie. Didn't you once say, "What's a lion doing in a man's house anyway"? Madison. Emily, if a man knows the truth, he has to say it. Madison and Emily regard each other shamelessly in love. Emily, meaning I love you. Is this the Charlie Madison who once said, "I'm not equipped to deal with the truth. I let God worry about the truth. I just want to know the momentary fact of things"? Your idea of facts, you said. Madison, meaning I love you too. Were you a home, a country, a world, and a universe in that order? Emily. Well, I'm quite prepared to supply all that All that as my end of the deal. Madison. What do you get out of it? Emily. I'll settle for a Hershey bar. They embrace. The door of the administration office opens and Chief Petty Officer Adams comes hurrying out. Behind, the nurse captain fills the rectangle of light made by the open doorway. Adams, hurrying up. Hey, Bus, there must be 100 of them. There's correspondence all over the place. In passing. Hi, Charlie. Their nurse captain, calling from the door. Commander, would you please come? We can't have all these people here. Madison, who has been locked in a mutually obsessed trance with Emily during all this, now smiles and turns to Cummings, who hasn't understood a word that was said during the previous dialogue. Madison, wrapping one arm around Emily and the other around Cummings, he jovially says to Cummings, All right, Fink, how do you want me to play it? Modest and self-effacing? Cummings as they move down the path to the administration office. Thanks, Charlie. I'll make this up to you. I'll do anything you say. Madison, beaming at his friend. Oh, I've got something in mind for you, buddy. By now, the rectangle of light made by the open administration office door is filling up with correspondence, and in a moment, the whole screen is a constant flare of flashbulbs. The North Pole, day. Actually, we dissolve in on a photograph of a parade on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Madison stands in the back of the main limousine, waving at the crowds who are flinging ticker tape at him. Dolly slowly back to show, first, that it is a photograph on the front page of the New York Globe. Then we see that the man looking at the globe is Lieutenant Commander Cummings, swathed in furs and parka with just enough of his frozen face sticking out to identify him. Continue to dolly even further back until all that can be seen of poor Cummings is a small black figure on an endless desolation of snow and ice. On screen, the following legend. Virtue is its own reward. And fade out. The end.